folks, welcome to the Prepared Homestead. This is Travis. Thank you all for stopping by to watch. We're going to be talking about weather and natural disasters and things that are going on across the country and really the world, and how they affect us, and some of the things that we need to do to prepare, or at least be aware of. There are a lot of people right now here in the United States that are being affected in one way or the other by just wildfires. It's been in the news a lot. I'm sure most of you are kind of aware of what's going on. Probably seen lots of pictures where the sky is just bright red or bright orange, and how the people are there. They're having to deal with this, and this is, on top of all the things that's going on, now they've got this. And of course, there's a wildfire season for most of the western United States, but this year it's a little bit different. We're going to talk about that today, and just some things to be aware of. I'm also making another video on my Patreon today for my members over there, and it will be kind of the same subject, but I'll be going more into maybe what's going on. Is this just a coincidence? This is just natural? Is there something to do with this grand solar minimum that's causing this? That, remember, we talked about that long before all this crazy 2020 stuff happened. Or is it possible that there is an agenda and these fires are purposely being set and directed? I don't know. So we'll talk about that over on Patreon if you're interested in seeing that video. But today, and let's start off with these wildfires. A lot of people may not realize that there's a map, or there's several maps going around of keeping track of the wildfires, and they basically start along the line. If you look at the eastern state side of the state line of Colorado, and you pretty much start there, and it works west, and they are all over the place. And we've been hearing a lot about California and now Oregon, that they're getting hit kind of the worst. But there are certainly wildfires in many other places. And in fact, so many that I've actually had some difficulty coming up with a grand total of the amount of wildfires that are spreading. The numbers that I'm getting out of California are around 3.5 million acres. They're saying it's the worst season on record. It's the worst. There's more acreage being burned than they've ever been able to record. Oregon, they have evacuated 500,000 people have had to evacuate and leave their homes because of the wildfires. And of course, those are the two worst areas, but they're, like I said, they're up in Montana, Idaho, Nevada, Colorado, Wyoming, down into Arizona, New Mexico area. So they're all over that western half of the United States. And it is affecting a lot of people. In fact, it's affecting everyone so much that here in the Ozarks, and I haven't checked the weather in the last couple of days, although you can't see on the video, but there is a little bit of a haze up in the sky. But especially a few days ago, the local weather was reporting that the sky, the gray haziness of the sky, was actually due to smoke coming from the west, from California and that area, some of those wildfires, because the sky didn't really look cloudy. It looked clear, but it wasn't blue. And around here, when it's not cloudy, we have some of the bluest, prettiest skies you've ever seen, but it just had a gray, hazy tint to it, very high up. And they said that it was due to the smoke that was in the air. And so it is affecting everyone, really. And it's going to affect everyone, especially economically. There's a lot of farmland that's being burned. There's a lot of homes that's being burned, and businesses. So there's this trickle-down effect. There's the immediate emergency of the wildfires and people's safety and people's homes being burned, and then there's this trickle-down effect of that damage, that initial damage of what it's going to affect us in a long term. And so this is a pretty major deal, and I kind of have the feeling that because so much stuff has been going on in 2020, that I've even said this, that we are becoming desensitized to disasters, desensitized to emergencies, desensitized to the apocalypse. And I have a gut feeling that that's being done on purpose. And so many people, I think they're wore out. I saw someone say, in fact, maybe it was one of my commenters on a YouTube video in the last couple of days said that people it's like they have PTSD now because of all the stuff going on, that it's just more stuff. They're stressing out, and then there's a lot of reports of people that are being just overwhelmed with stress and fear because of all the things that's happening right now. And so it's really taken its toll, and I think that's also a big factor in all these riots and civil unrest, is that people, they were locked down for so long, and all the stuff's going on, and they've just kind of lost hope, and well, it's a kettle that's boiled over. But now back to the fires. Certain regions, some of you may not have to worry about fires too much. Around here, even though we have a lot of forest land, Missouri, especially this part of Missouri, it's just all forest. But we almost rarely ever have forest fires. We may sometimes have fields that catch on fire, and it may burn a little bit, but we have a lot of moisture. It's very humid here. We get around 45 inches of rain annually. And even though we're kind of going through a drought right now, it's nothing at all compared to what places like California. And as I say this, look behind me. This is a portion of the land that I haven't really done anything with. This leads down to the creek, as you can see the path behind me. But the reason why I'm showing you this is it looks pretty green, and we're under what's considered drought conditions here in the Ozarks. So for people like us in certain areas, Appalachian Mountains and things like that, you don't have a whole lot of forest fires to deal with. But we do have other things. We have tornadoes here. That's probably the biggest thing that people worry about. In the wintertime, we can have ice storms, and sometimes we can have really bad ice storms. Several years ago, we had an ice storm that took out in the Ozark region about 800,000 people without power total. And some of them were without power for 2 weeks. I, at that time, was without power for 14 days. So there are disasters everywhere. And these are some things that we need to be prepared for. I mean, certainly we talk about it all the time lately, about being prepared for the collapse of government, the collapse of the economy, government takeover, New World Order. We talk about these things, Marxist revolution, and rightly so, because those things are happening. But along the way, there's also just the things that happen naturally, and we have to be prepared for those. And then, as I'll probably talk about in the Patreon video, there's also the possibility of some of these natural things not being so natural, and maybe they are being orchestrated and manipulated, but we won't talk about that in this video. It's actually really sad what's going on out there, as I kind of laugh, and I do that lightly because while surprisingly the death toll, the last I saw, I think it was only 7 or 8 people, and thankfully it's only been that few, but the amount of destruction that it's taking on that area, and I get people all the time wanting to move from California, and it's gotten to the point that California is a beautiful state. It is. The coastlines are beautiful. The forest, the northern part of California is beautiful. There's just some amazing landscape in California. I think that's why it was, the population grew and it became popular. But between the crazy liberals, between the earthquakes and the forest fires and the lack of water and all that, well, I don't know why anyone would want to live there anymore. No offense to any viewer from California, but I cannot think of any justified reason any longer for someone to live there. It's really being, that whole region, this has all taken its toll, and that is another reason why we should prepare. And these people, hopefully, some of them were prepared. Hopefully some of them had bug out bags and things that they needed to take with them, because a lot of times when these forest fires, these wildfires hit, you don't have a whole lot of time. to evacuate. The smart thing to do would be have a pre-planned areas to go to and evacuate before it's completely surrounding you. I read one article that there were about 200 people that they were trying to evacuate, and they ended up getting completely surrounded by fire, weren't able to leave, and the local officials basically gave up on them. And there were some, I believe, some Army Air guys in choppers that were going to go in and try to rescue them, and they actually had to disobey orders because the orders came down to leave them, that it was too dangerous for these choppers to fly, and a couple of Black Hawks and maybe some others. I don't remember how many choppers were involved, but they basically had to disobey orders, which they did, and they went in and they were able to successfully rescue these roughly 200 people that were trying to evacuate. If they had not done that, it's quite plausible that those 200 people would have perished. So there's some heroes there, through all this. But the point is that so many people just aren't prepared. Look at the hurricane stuff. A lot of times, as it's getting there and they start to realize that it's really bad, you see this mass exodus of people, and it starts bottlenecking. It starts becoming a problem on its own of just people trying to evacuate, instead of being smart and evacuating ahead of time. It's very similar to what I say, if things started collapsing and people wanted to bug out, basically there's really only two ways to do it. You need to be bugging out before it really gets bad, so before everyone else is bugging out, or you need to hunker down for a while and let all the people going crazy be crazy for a few days or even a few weeks, and then bug out then. Because if you bug out when everyone else is kind of losing their mind, it's going to be bad for you. And it's the same way with these evacuations. So you need to have proper equipment, proper bug out gear in your vehicles, or at least readily available to quickly put in your vehicles and get out. But then you have to have a place to go, right? You need to know where you're going. You can't just get in the vehicle and just start driving. A lot of people think that's it, or they just put it on their backpack, on their back and start walking. You've got to have some designated locations. You need probably several options, because if it's, for instance, a wildfire, what if the wildfire is coming in from the area you were going to go to? So you need different exit routes, different backups, lots of contingencies. Remember, 3 is 2, 2 is 1, 1 is none. And this will apply to lots of things. We're even though many of you may not be affected directly by the wildfires going on right now, again, we can use this as a learning experience. We can see what's going on and try to figure out how we can use that information to help us, whether it's natural disasters or it is some type of SHTF apocalyptic kind of situation. We can use these things that are happening around us to learn from. And that's really the best thing that we can do in the long run, because inevitably we are going to face something. Inevitably you're going to deal with a hurricane or a tornado or an ice storm or a wildfire, or other things, earthquakes, and then it could be something more social, political. The odds of you experiencing something like that in your life is actually pretty high. So that's why we prepare. Not because we think the world is ending, although it appears to be that way right now. We prepare because we know that the odds of something happening in our lifetime are pretty good. So it's much better. It's like insurance. You hear this, preppers say this all the time, and it's true. You have car insurance. How many of you ever actually used your car insurance? There's a lot of people that's never used their car insurance. Some people have had their car insurance for 10, 20, 30 years, and they've never filed a claim on it. But they still have it, right? Same with your house. You have homeowners insurance. Some people never have a claim on their homeowners insurance, but they have it for those what-if moments. And that's what prepping is. Prepping is for those what-if moments. We don't want them to happen usually. And sometimes it happens in a way that we weren't expecting. 2020 again is a good year for that, to prove that point. But we prepare because we know the odds are that at some point in our life something's going to happen that being prepared mentally and physically and having a certain equipment on hand to be prepared for would be very helpful. And so that's why we do it, right? And going back to these wildfires, there's a lot of stuff going on there, and it's very interesting. I wanted to touch just a little bit on this, and like I said, I'll go into it more into my Patreon video. It's interesting that the law enforcement there, a lot of local law enforcement are saying that they believe that a lot of these fires are being set, they're arson fires. There were some rumors that it was being orchestrated by Antifa, but I was reading that most of the local law enforcement officials have spoken out and said, we don't have any evidence that it's Antifa. Is it legitimate that they don't have evidence, or is there some political motivation for them to say that? Honestly, I can't say, and I hate to speculate, but there's a part of me that wants to think that if there's all these fires all over the West, and they're saying now that a lot of them were started by arsons, I have a hard time believing that a bunch of just random arsonists just decided to go out and start setting fires with no motivation. So even if it's not Antifa, I suspect that there's some motivation here to cause destruction. If you can remember, if you guys watched, I made a video a few weeks ago, and I talked about a video from the 60s where G. Edward Griffin spoke about how communism would try to take hold in America. And I remember one of the things that he said, and it was in not the Communist Manifesto, but some of their documents, and how, basically their training documents of Marxists of how to teach their people how to start revolutions. And in one of them he was saying how they talked about starting fires was a big deal. Building fires, wildfires, just start burning things. And the reason, as they said, is that it incites fear and terror in people when they start seeing that, the areas around them are burning, whether it's wild areas or building structures, homes. That's very terrifying, and it does a lot of destruction. So am I saying that these are being started by Marxists? No, I'm not saying that specifically. I am saying that it seems to be a really unusual coincidence that all the rioting and civil unrest that we've had for the last few months by Marxist groups, openly Marxist groups, that claim that they're going to bring down America and destroy America, and less than 2 months out from the election, and they claim that it's going to get worse leading up to the election. And all this time there's been more fires going in the United States, wildfires, than ever in recorded history. And many of them are being believed to be started by arsonists. To me, there's just too much of a coincidence to say that they're not connected. And then here's another thing that I'll go into in the Patreon video, is that if you look at a wildfire map right now of North America, there's all these fires in the west, all the way up to the U.S.-Canadian border, just solid almost. And then as soon as you cross that Canadian border, there's almost nothing. In fact, Canada announced a couple of weeks ago that this year has been the lowest, one of the lowest years on record for wildfires. So they're not getting hardly any wildfires up in Canada, but you cross that U.S.-Canadian border and then boom, there's wildfires. Those fires must be about as smart as the virus is on knowing which side to pick on. But anyways, use the things that happen as a learning experience, because where you're at, you may be pretty safe, kind of like here. We don't have any rioting, there's not a lot of virus killing people, there's no wildfires, where we're at, we're pretty isolated from the craziness. But that's not a time for you to become comfortable and lazy and say, I don't have to be vigilant, I don't have to learn because I'm in a safe place. No, that's the time that you take to become more prepared. So for many of you that live in places that you say, well, I'm not being affected that much by this stuff, don't just waste that time and opportunity. Take that time and opportunity to become more prepared, because there's a very strong possibility that at some point something's gonna happen in your area, and you're gonna wish that you were more prepared. So stay on that and become more prepared. All right, folks, thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.